Hello, my name is Stefan Collins, and today I will be doing the video portion for my Project B project for the class of COM 101. Um, this will be my final installment for the video portion of this project. Um, so I wanted to start off by talking about what I knew about sustainable and ethical fashion. Um, Before we started this project, before we went on the course of researching and figuring out, and like I did my own research by watching like TED Talks and little short docu series that I found here and there. Um, I didn't really give much thought. Sorry, I didn't really give much thought to the idea of what sustainable or ethical fashion was. I didn't even hear of the term sustainable fashion before. Um, I would think, of course, about the sweatshops because you hear about them and like they're shown in media sometimes, but I never really gave much thought about to the clothes I was wearing. Maybe recently, before the project even started, I even started to give leeway in my mind to the idea, maybe somebody was um underpaid or mistreated making this garment, making this scarf that I wear. Um, and I thought about that, but I didn't really make make it a conscious thought. So like it was a passing thought. Um, what I can say is that like my perceptions, um, my perceptions were that I didn't really think that it mattered that much. I know that doesn't sound right, but like I guess as the average consumer, it doesn't they don't really have to think about where their clothing comes from as long as their clothing's getting made. So I didn't really think about where my clothing was coming from. Um, but since I started the project, I started looking into it, and there's like a lot more to the clothing industry than I initially thought. Um, which I initially thought there was like only like runway shows and like people knitting and like using the sewing machines in a closet to make their designs. And I realized that was neglectful type thinking, but now I know that there's like sustainable fashion, which is making sure that your clothing is able to be passed down and used by other people. And I'll get to that in a second. And there's things like fast fashion, which is like the trends, like trends with music, not birds, trends with fashion, like where you see these new flashy shoes on Instagram. You gotta have them. You go out, you get them. Then like a couple months later, you realize you don't want them, and you throw them out instead of doing anything else with them. Like fast fashion is the result of much waste a year. Um, there's like a landfill waste with different things like textile clothing, which is like the ink in your clothing seeping, permeating into the ground and like ruining the environment. So there's like a lot more implications with these with ethical fashion, sustainable fashion, fast fashion. There's like a lot of components that go into all of these, more so than just the creation of a garment coming from some place where people are being paid and going straight to you. There's a lot in the middle. Like maybe these people aren't being paid. Maybe maybe these people are being mistreated. Maybe this garment is being cheaply made. Um, and maybe you might throw your clothes away and they might end up in the landfill, contributing to fashion waste that is getting worse each year. Um, I did in my research for this video, I have found at least three brands that are, I would say, ethically sourced. Um, the first thing I want to point out is like the best way to get like ethically sourced clothing and sustainable clothing. or like the best way to practice sustainable clothing is going thrifting, like going to your local thrift store, as people make donations just for the simple fact of not throwing their clothes out and contributing to the land waste. Besides that, I found like the first brand that I found was a brand called Know the Origin. It sells clothes and accessories. So like it would sell like toothbrushes. Like instead of plastic toothbrushes, you can go to get a bamboo toothbrush, and also like products such as what do you call it, safe, or no waste toothpaste. That's what it's called. So things like that is something that you can get at like brands like Know the Origin. Um, there's a oh, it's based in the UK. It makes clothing for both men and women. Um, they On their website they make sure to show exactly where and how their clothing is being made. And one thing that I have found out, one second, sorry. One thing I have found out while researching this is that one thing that I found out while researching this is that the brands that are ethically sourced and the brands that are sustainable in nature are more expensive than regular clothing brands like Forever 21 and those. And sorry, like, because they're taking a lot more time with their garments. With brands like Forever 21, their clothing is a lot what do you call it? A lot quicker and more easy to produce, because like they're getting somebody in a factory for like little pay to work on it. And that's why these brands require more profit, um, which could be a contributing factor to why people uh, don't choose them over the competition. I also have at least two more. Or I have a Viha, which is a shoe brand. They use organic materials. Have strict fair trade laws. So like making sure that like what they get from their suppliers is fair, and like they know exactly what's going on in the factories, is if their shoes are being made in a factory. And the last one that I wanted to talk about is Christy Dawn, which is a women's only brand. All their clothes are made from upcycled fabrics, and upcycled fabrics, which limits textile waste. And as I mentioned before, textile is like the kind of clothing that you wear which has like ink in it. And what happens if you throw out that garment is that like it could possibly land in a waste field. It lands in a waste field, and the ink from your clothing seeps into the ground, causing environmental damage to the things around it. Um, I think that sets these brands apart. That they get all their they make sure to go out of their way to use all organic materials, to make sure their clothes are ethically sourced and as environmentally friendly as possible. um, with going organic, it also like leaves ways to like the fact that because organic fabrics for your clothing makes it more strong and durable. I'm not sure if this is ethically sourced, um, but it's easier for it to like withstand the years and be able to be handed down to thrift stores or your family members or your friends, and last a lot longer, so we can like limit the amount of waste that goes out each year. um they're able to thrive off of like people who more people are becoming conscious of the notion of ethical fashion, um and that's making them more aware. So like they go onto YouTube and like find videos to like help them figure out what brands are ethically sourced, and then you'll find things about like how H&M, Forever 21, I believe Old Navy aren't like properly ethically sourced. So they're able to thrive off of these, and also because they have such high prices. I know Christie's Dawn is like a brand that is a little bit popular amongst ethical and sustainable fashion community, for like women, because they specialize in dresses and like long dress suits, like like long garments. What should other companies learn from these companies? Um, I believe they should like learn how to be more over top of everything with using organic materials. They should learn how to be more transparent in where their clothing is coming from, where their materials are coming from, how their workers are being treated, and how like their clothing is being made. Because these brands are very upfront with telling you what kind of materials they use, where their factories are, where the clothing is being made, by who they're being made, um, why they do what they do, and how it helps what they do. With brands like, I keep bringing it up, but Forever 21, you wouldn't get that type of transparency, because like because it's like a brand, it's like a company where there's so many different sellers, and some places you won't even know where the clothing came from at all. So I think that's the biggest thing that I believe big companies should learn from these companies. Um, Now the thing is, with these companies, like the media barely portrays them, like, or barely covers them rather. So it doesn't really have a light that they particularly portrays these companies in, because not often would you see a story about ethical or sustainable fashion in the mainstream media, as it's a problem that I guess is not seen as a big deal as of right now in the mainstream. So they kind of steamroll over top of the issue and don't really talk about it. Sorry, my bad. Um, but I feel like I have seen stories before, and like they portray. I've seen it like on things like Fox News, or like maybe not Fox News, maybe like Channel 6, Channel 3, just like local news networks, for me at least. They would talk about they would talk about like ethical fashion, and like I think I've known kids in high school who were interested in making like ethical brands, and like they talked about what kind of how they would make their materials, and like how they would make them, and like they were considering ethical and sustainable fashion. Sorry, I thought, okay. um, and I believe they would be interviewed locally for newspapers like the Inquiry, the Philadelphia Inquiry, and local television network stations, and they would be portrayed quite positively, because like it's a subject where you can't really um, portray it negatively, as like the intentions of people who want to do ethical and sustainable fashion are inherently good, because they just want clothing. Oops, they just want clothing to be sorry, I'm saying so much. They just want clothing to be helpful. Helpful. They want it to be healthy for like the people who make it, healthy for the environment when we decide to get rid of the garments that we wear, and they want it to like be able to last a long time. As I've worked on this project, I've come to realize that the media doesn't really think about ethical and sustainable fashion as much as they should. Um, what I wish for the future is that like because everything has its moment in the cycle, the 24-hour news cycle, before it gets swept away back under the rug. I hope in the future ethical and sustainable fashion makes a big move, and like people just take a minute to like look at it in the spotlight, and take a look at it in the spotlight and make sure to like see how important it is, or like maybe a big company like H&M or Hollister or Nike gets in trouble for like doing something with sweatshops, and that opens a broader conversation to like how clothing is made, and like it makes more people aware to ethical and sustainable fashion. So people who companies like Pact, like Know the Origin, like Christy Dawn, people from those companies take a step out into the limelight and try to be a figurehead and speak about these issues and make it known and like get more people aware to the idea, because the big thing nowadays is like super many people are super uninformed about these things. So that's what I hope for with the future for ethical and sustainable fashion, because it is very important. It's very important to make sure your clothes is sustainable. It's very important to make sure you look at where your clothing is coming from and how people are being treated, and making sure your money is going to a good cause at the end of the day. And with that statement, I think that's where I'm going to leave off. This is well over the time limit. I talk too much. Thank you for watching. That's going to wrap it up, and have a good one.